You don't need a perfect year to change your life. You don't even need a perfect month. You only need one powerful day, one conscious 24-hour cycle where you decide to stop living on autopilot. Most people don't lose life in one big failure. They lose it in small distractions repeated daily. They wake up late, scroll without purpose, delay their goals and call it busy life. But busyness is not progress. Movement is not achievement. Time is not the enemy. Unawareness is. The first hour of your day is not just a routine. It is a silent conversation with your mind, a quiet agreement about who you are going to become for the next 23 hours. The moment you open your eyes, you are already standing at a crossroads where two paths begin to form without noise. One path is unconscious, rushed, and scattered, where the phone becomes your first companion, where comparison enters before clarity, where your mind is pulled into thousands of lives before you have even met your own thoughts. The other path is intentional, slow, and grounded, where you allow yourself to breathe into your own existence before the world starts demanding pieces of you. That first hour is not ordinary time. It is the foundation layer of everything that follows. And most people never realize they are building their entire day on something they never consciously designed. When you wake up and immediately give your attention to distractions, your mind learns something subtle but powerful, that focus is not important, that your own presence is secondary, that external noise deserves priority over internal clarity. Slowly, this becomes a pattern not just for the morning, but for life itself. You begin to react instead of create. You begin to consume instead of build. You begin to drift instead of direct. And all of it begins in that fragile space between sleep and awareness, where the mind is most impressionable, most open, most vulnerable. But when you reclaim that first hour with intention, something shifts quietly inside you. Even if nothing dramatic happens outside, inside there is a sense of alignment that starts to grow. The way you breathe becomes more conscious. The way you think becomes more selective. The way you respond to your thoughts becomes more deliberate. In that space, you are not chasing the world. You are returning to yourself before stepping into it. That return creates a subtle strength that cannot be explained in loud terms, but it can be felt in every decision that follows. The first hour has the power to decide whether you will live your day as a reaction or as a creation. A reactive morning pulls you into urgency that is not even yours. Notifications, messages, updates, and comparisons start shaping your emotions before you have shaped your own mindset. You begin the day already influenced, already behind, already mentally scattered. And when the mind starts scattered, the rest of the day becomes an attempt to catch up with clarity that was never established in the first place. But an intentional morning builds a different kind of energy. Even small acts like sitting in silence for a few minutes, observing your breath, or simply resisting the urge to rush into the world, create a powerful internal shift. It tells your mind that you are in charge of direction, not the noise outside. It creates a pause where thoughts can settle instead of collide. And in that settling, there is a kind of emotional clarity that does not come from motivation but from stillness. What happens in that first hour does not stay in that hour. It echoes into how you speak, how you think, how you handle pressure, how you treat your own goals. A scattered beginning often leads to scattered decisions, where priorities blur and energy gets drained without purpose. A centered beginning creates a quiet discipline that stays with you even when the day becomes unpredictable, even when challenges appear without warning, even when emotions try to pull you away from focus. There is also something deeply personal about that first hour, because it reveals how you see yourself when no one is watching. Do you rush away from your own presence, or do you stay long enough to acknowledge it? Do you treat your mind like a place worth understanding, or like a space to escape from? The way you answer these questions in silence becomes the blueprint of your mental environment. And that environment shapes not just your productivity, but your emotional stability, your patience, your resilience, your ability to stay connected to your own direction, even when everything around you feels uncertain. Discipline in small actions is often underestimated because it does not produce instant applause. It does not feel dramatic, it does not create noise, and it does not give you the emotional high that big promises or sudden changes give. But life is not transformed in dramatic moments. It is shaped in quiet repetitions that no one claps for, but everyone eventually notices in the form of results. A single small action, when repeated with consistency, becomes heavier than motivation, because motivation changes with mood, but discipline remains even when the mood disappears. Most people wait for a big shift before they start taking themselves seriously. They wait for a perfect day, a perfect mindset, or a perfect opportunity. But perfection is a delay disguised as preparation. And in that delay, time continues to pass quietly, building habits that either support your growth or slowly pull you away from it. Small actions decide that direction. The way you wake up, the way you respond to your thoughts, the way you handle distractions, the way you treat your time when no one is watching. All of these seem small individually, but together they form the structure of your life. There is a silent power in doing small things with seriousness. When you decide to read even a few pages instead of scrolling endlessly, you are training your mind to value depth over distraction. When you drink water instead of reaching for instant stimulation, you are teaching your body discipline over impulse. When you take a moment to plan instead of rushing into randomness, you are shaping your future with clarity instead of confusion. None of these actions look powerful in isolation, but repetition turns them into identity. Identity is not something that appears suddenly. It is built slowly through repeated behavior. You do not become focused by saying you are focused. You become focused by repeatedly choosing focus over distraction in small moments. You do not become strong by declaring strength. You become strong by showing up, even when no one is forcing you to. Small actions are the language through which identity is formed, and every repeated action is a sentence you are writing about yourself. The challenge is that small actions feel invisible in the beginning. There is no immediate reward, no instant validation, and no visible transformation. This is where most people give up. They expect early results to match their effort instantly, and when they don't see it, they assume it is not working. But growth does not announce itself loudly. It accumulates quietly. Like drops of water filling a container, it does not feel like much in the moment, but over time it becomes impossible to ignore. The real difference between people is not intelligence or opportunity, but what they repeat when no one is watching. Some repeat distraction, some repeat avoidance, some repeat delay. Others repeat effort, repetition, and awareness. Both sides live the same hours, but those hours are used differently. And usage, not time itself, becomes destiny. Small disciplined actions also build emotional strength. When you keep promises to yourself in small ways, your mind starts trusting you. That trust becomes confidence. And confidence is not loud, it is steady. It is the quiet belief that you will not abandon yourself, even when things get uncomfortable. That belief is not built in one decision, but in hundreds of small decisions where you chose responsibility over escape. Even failure behaves differently when small discipline is present. Instead of breaking you, it becomes part of the process. Because when your system is built on small, consistent actions, one setback does not destroy everything. It only adjusts the direction. But when your system is built on sudden bursts of effort, one failure feels like collapse because there is no foundation holding it together. Small actions are not small in impact. They are small in appearance, not in power. Their power is in accumulation, in repetition, in patience. In the quiet way they reshape who you are without asking for attention. Over time, they create a version of you that is not dependent on motivation, not controlled by mood, not waiting for inspiration, but grounded in rhythm and responsibility that continues even when everything feels uncertain. What you repeat in 24 hours slowly becomes you, not in a dramatic or sudden way, but in a quiet accumulation that most people never notice until years have already passed. A single day may feel insignificant, almost too small to matter, but a day is never just a day. It is a rehearsal of your future identity. Every action you repeat within those hours is like a brush stroke. And over time, those strokes begin to form a picture that reflects who you have become, not who you once intended to be. People often believe identity is something fixed, something they already have, but identity is far more fluid than that. It is shaped continuously by repetition. The way you spend your mornings, the way you respond to pressure, the way you treat your responsibilities, the way you handle distractions, all of these repeated patterns slowly carve a definition of who you are becoming. You do not suddenly become disciplined or undisciplined. You become it through repetition, through small decisions that feel too minor to question in the moment, but powerful enough to define your direction. Within a single 24-hour cycle, there are hundreds of small choices. Each one carries a silent vote for the kind of person you are shaping. When you choose focus over distraction, you reinforce discipline. When you choose distraction over focus, you reinforce avoidance. Neither choice feels life-changing in isolation, but repetition turns them into identity. The mind learns through patterns, not promises. It does not listen to what you say once. It listens to what you do repeatedly without interruption. Most people underestimate how quickly repetition builds identity because change does not feel immediate. You can repeat something for days without noticing a difference, and that lack of visible transformation often creates doubt. But identity is not built on visible change. It is built on invisible accumulation. A drop of water does not reshape a stone instantly, but over time it creates patterns that cannot be ignored. The same principle applies to human behavior. Every repeated action is a drop, and every 24-hour cycle is a container slowly being filled. What makes this even more powerful is that repetition does not just shape behavior, it shapes belief. When you repeatedly show up for yourself, even in small ways, your mind starts to believe that you are someone who can be trusted. That belief becomes internal strength. On the other hand, when you repeatedly break your own promises, even in small ways, your mind starts to doubt your reliability. That doubt slowly weakens your sense of direction. This is why people often feel stuck, not because they lack ability, but because their repetition is not aligned with the identity they want to build. The 24-hour cycle becomes a mirror. It reflects what you value more than what you say you value. You may say growth matters, But if your daily repetition is filled with delay, avoidance, and distraction, the mirror reflects something different. It shows truth without language, without excuses, without distortion. It shows what you are consistently choosing, not what you are occasionally hoping for. Even emotions are shaped by repetition within these hours. If you repeatedly engage in stress, comparison, and distraction, your emotional state begins to normalize that environment. If you repeatedly engage in clarity, focus, and intentional pauses, your emotional state begins to stabilize around that structure. The mind adapts to what it experiences most often, not what it experiences occasionally. That is why 24 hours are powerful. Because they are not just time, they are exposure. There is also a quiet transformation that happens when repetition becomes conscious. When you start noticing what you are repeating, you begin to interrupt automatic behavior. You begin to question patterns that once felt normal. You start realizing that not every impulse deserves action, not every distraction deserves attention, not every thought deserves obedience. That awareness creates space, and in that space, new repetition becomes possible. The most important truth is that you are always repeating something. There is no neutral day. Even in stillness, you are reinforcing a pattern. The question is never whether you are repeating, but what you are repeating. And that answer multiplied across every 24-hour cycle slowly becomes the architecture of your life, shaping your direction without asking for permission, forming your identity without announcing its arrival, and building your future quietly through what you choose again and again without interruption. Awareness of time changes the way a person lives even when nothing external changes at all. The hours remain the same, the responsibilities remain the same, the environment remains the same, but the perception shifts everything. When a person begins to truly feel that time is not something infinite or guaranteed, even ordinary moments start to carry weight. The same 24 hours that once felt ordinary begin to feel like a responsibility, a silent opportunity that will never return in the same form again. Most people live inside time without ever really seeing it. They move through days as if there will always be another identical version waiting ahead. This creates a kind of unconscious delay in life, where important things are postponed, personal growth is postponed, emotional healing is postponed, and dreams are postponed with the assumption that later will always be available. But time does not wait for awareness. It continues moving even when attention is absent. And what is not used consciously becomes something that quietly disappears without recognition. When awareness enters, everything becomes more intentional. Even simple actions begin to feel different because they are no longer automatic. A conversation is no longer just a conversation. It becomes a moment that will not repeat in the same emotional state. A task is no longer just a task. It becomes a piece of time that is either invested or lost. This shift in perception does not add pressure. It adds clarity. And clarity changes how choices are made within those 24 hours. The realization that time is limited does not have to create fear. It creates focus. Fear makes a person rush without direction, but awareness makes a person slow down with purpose. When you know that every hour is part of something non-repeating, you begin to choose differently. You begin to question where your attention is going. You begin to notice how easily time slips away in distractions that do not contribute to anything meaningful. And in that noticing, the quality of your decisions begins to change quietly. There is also a deep emotional layer to time awareness. When you start to understand that today will never return, Even emotional responses become more thoughtful. Anger loses some of its urgency because you realize how much of your limited time it consumes. Overthinking becomes less attractive because you begin to see how it steals presence from the current moment. Even regret starts to lose its control because awareness shifts focus from what was lost to what is still available in the present cycle of hours. The value of time is not measured in productivity alone. It is measured in presence. A fully lived hour is not just an hour filled with activity. It is an hour where attention was not divided between regret and distraction, between fear and avoidance. When awareness increases, presence becomes more natural. You begin to notice small details that were always there but previously ignored. The rhythm of your thoughts, the quality of your focus, the direction of your energy, all become clearer when time is no longer treated as something endless. One of the most powerful changes that happens with time awareness is the reduction of unnecessary delay. Procrastination is often built on the illusion of more time. When that illusion weakens, action becomes more immediate. Not because pressure increases, but because understanding deepens. You begin to realize that waiting does not preserve time, it consumes it quietly. Every delayed action is still part of the same 24 hours, just used differently. This awareness also changes the relationship with priorities. Things that once felt equally important begin to separate into what actually deserves attention and what only creates noise. Time starts to act like a filter. It removes what is not essential when you start seeing it clearly. And in that clarity, focus becomes easier because energy is no longer scattered across things that do not align with what truly matters. Even rest feels different when time is understood properly. Rest is no longer escape from time. It becomes a conscious use of it. A pause that restores clarity rather than a distraction that avoids responsibility. Sleep, silence, reflection, and stillness all gain meaning when they are seen as part of the same limited cycle instead of interruptions in it. Awareness of time does not require dramatic change in lifestyle. It requires a shift in attention, a simple realization that what is happening right now is not replaceable. That realization slowly reshapes behavior without force. It reduces unnecessary urgency while increasing intentional living. And in that balance, life begins to feel less like something that is happening to you and more like something you are actively participating in with full attention to what each passing hour is actually offering before it disappears quietly into what cannot be returned.